oil gas, as Mr. Parfit referred to it, but also the oil that's extracted from the ground. There's a lot of water used in that process. You know, I think it's only fair to mention that the industry itself is probably ahead of government on this. The industry, you know, they need their social license, and they know that. And companies are working really hard and spending a pile of money right now to see how they can access deep aquifers. And when I'm talking about aquifers that are thousands of meters below anything that you would ever describe as surface water. This water cannot ever make it to the surface. It's highly saline, but it's water. And if they can find a way to take the enough of the salt out of it so that it's usable for their fracking process, then that's probably the solution.
Where do they get the water that they use now for fracking, and what do they do with it after they've finished fracking with it?
Actually, most of the gas companies that I have witnessed working in the Northeast recycle the water that they use. They spend a lot of money on equipment that allows them to recycle the water. They do use some surface water now in the Horn River Basin. I know there's a lot of surface water being used there. I know the Fort Nelson First Nation is concerned about the amount of surface water that's being used there, but the industry's aware of that, government's aware of that. And there's, as I say, a lot of money being spent to find deep sources of water to use. There's also water that's drawn out of Williston Reservoir and other big bodies of water. We've had drought. So there's this competition, of course, for water, and the industry recognizes. I'm quite confident that they're going to have to find better sources of water, and so it's an issue. It's actually a challenging issue, but fortunately there's enough money in the oil and gas industry to pay for, I think, a good solution.
Is he right that it's the Oil and Gas Commission that decides who gets the water license rather than the Environment Ministry at the moment?
It is right now, and I mean he certainly points out a real issue. I know we had a situation when I was minister with respect to some water being drawn out of Williston Reservoir, and there was some communications mix-up essentially between the Ministry of Environment and the Commission. I believe the Commission does a good job. I believe that the Commission is actually a model, for regulation and permitting that government could probably apply in other situations. But there's some issues there, and I think that the government's aware of those issues and plans to fix them.
A couple of energy issues, again relating to what was until recently the former minister's ministry. Question about hydro rates. Jock Finlayson. Here's Jock.
Minister, there's concern, as you know, among some ratepayer groups, including in industry, over steady hikes in BC hydro rates, which are climbing between 5 and 15% a year. Can you explain why these increases are happening? And do you believe they'll continue to increase at the same pace going forward?
Another good question. I can say and would have said, I would have given you the same answer yesterday when I was minister. I don't believe that there's almost anything that government or BC Hydro can do to stabilize the hydro rates, the electricity rates where they are right now. They're going to have to go up because all of these assets that we refer to as heritage assets in the Clean Energy Act need work.
So these are all the dams that were built WAC Bennett era, Bill Bennett era dams.
Right,
so
all the large,
Revelstoke, Mica,
exactly.
WAC Bennett dam,
all of those
power lines.
All of those assets need refurbishment. They need maintenance, and actually we need some new turbines. We're putting BC Hydro is putting a new turbine in Revelstoke and a new turbine at Mica. BC Hydro right now has a 5-year capital investment plan of $10.5 billion. That's a lot of money. That'll be carried, it'll be amortized obviously, but it'll be carried by the ratepayer. That in and of itself will drive rates up, and I get that industry, depends on relatively low electricity rates in this province, and I actually don't think that that's going to change relative to what other jurisdictions pay for electricity. We're always going to have, I think, if we do things right, low electricity rates, but you can't keep them where they are right now and maintain the assets that we have.
When we have New Democrats on the show, they blame it always on independent power projects. It's all independent power projects, run-of-the-river projects. That's what's driving up the price of electricity.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things that I did when I got the job was I asked my staff to tell me about that. Tell me, what is the proportion of proposed rate increases that comes from this and purchased by BC Hydro of green energy from run-of-the-river or wind or solar or whatever it is. It's minuscule. I can tell you, and I have got no skin in the game any longer. I can tell you that it's absolutely minuscule. The NDP is wrong. I suspect they know they're wrong about this. It has some minimal impact, but the largest part of the impact, the largest factor driving rates up, is investment by BC Hydro. There's some other factors, but that's the main one.
Okay, we do have a question on IPPs, another question about them. This one's from John Horgan, so here's John.
There's concern that independent power producers are paying less in water rentals than BC Hydro is for the same resource. Do you agree with me that independent power producers should pay the same rates for water rentals as BC Hydro does?
I think John is wrong. I think that independent power producers actually pay a very, very high rate for the use of water. It's actually more than what they would pay in many other jurisdictions. And I just think he has his facts wrong on this one.
Jock Finlayson, natural gas, greenhouse gas. Here's Jock.
Mr. Bennett, as you know, the province of BC has adopted the most aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets of any state or province in North America. At the same time, we've got a large natural gas industry that's been growing and which has tremendous potential to expand in the future. How are we going to simultaneously reduce greenhouse gas emissions by a third in the next decade while continuing to encourage the growth of the natural gas sector?
Well, the Premier was in California this week celebrating climate action with Governor Schwarzenegger.
Well, this is one of the key areas of public policy where Premier Campbell and I vehemently disagree. I'm probably closer to being what's known as a denier, climate change denier. And it's not that I don't think the climate is changing. I think the climate is changing. It seems to be warming up. We don't all in the BC Liberal Government Caucus believe that human-caused carbon dioxide is the culprit in climate change. They're a
Really?
great.
I thought you were all one big happy family on that.
Well, we've always had the capacity to disagree on some things and keep it inside the family. And there's lots of my colleagues that see it the same way that I do, and lots of my colleagues that see it the same way that the Premier does. And the Premier's the Premier, and he rules the day on the final decisions on policy. So I told him when I took this job, I reminded him of my own personal view that we were going to be very challenged to meet our greenhouse gas emission targets, and that I personally do not believe that we should be spending public money for the sole purpose of eliminating carbon dioxide flowing into the atmosphere. I believe in conservation. This goal of 66% of our incremental growth in demand for electricity from conservation that we have put into the Clean Energy Act is a fine goal. It's a good thing to shoot for. We should try and do that. We should try and find ways to have people use less fuel. It's all part of conservation. I believe we should also encourage the growth of renewable energy in the province. We shouldn't do what Ontario has done. We shouldn't encourage the growth of renewable energy to the point where we drive our electricity rates through the roof. We have to be reasonable about the way we encourage the growth of renewable energy. But in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions, the question from Jock. I think we're going to be very challenged to meet those emission targets. And let's be honest. I mean, the gas industry pays the bills. in this province.
$2 billion a year, something like that.
So I think you have to find a way to balance those two things. You encourage renewable energy as much as you possibly can. You get people using less fossil fuels. There's ways to do that. There's an electrification. You know, let's try these electric cars. Let's electrify the gas industry in the Northeast. Let's stop using diesel and stop using natural gas where we can. There's all those things you can do as long as the public is not having to pay all the freight on that, and you do as well as you can. If the government's policy is to reduce greenhouse gases, which it is, you do the best you can to do that. But I don't think that there's any way we're going to be able to meet the targets.
What do you think of the carbon tax?
I don't like the carbon tax. I've never liked the carbon tax. My constituents don't like the carbon tax. I suspect most British Columbians don't like the carbon tax.
It covers a fair amount of ground. Well, let's try Site C. Now, we had a question on tape, but we're not going to get to it, so I'll just ask the question. It was from John Horgan. And is Site C something that should go ahead, will go ahead? Are we building it because we need it, or are we building it for export?
I personally believe that Site C should go ahead as long as it gets a proper environmental assessment, and that environmental assessment has to include a very significant effort with the Treaty 8 First Nations. They are currently not supportive. We've got a lot of work to do there. I think BC Hydro is up to it, frankly. I actually think that there's some new people. There's a new CEO. There's a new board chair. Deputy Minister Reimer used to be with the ministry that I was with. He's over there. Now, they've got some good people. I think that they will get the job done in terms of doing the appropriate level of consultation. As far as whether we need the project, we do need the project. The project will generate 900 megawatts of electricity. And here's the piece, the fact that really won me over. You're going to take you're essentially going to generate 900 megawatts of electricity. That's about 30% of what the WAC Bennett Dam generates. And you're going to do that by using about 5% of the footprint of the Williston Reservoir. So you take 5% of the environmental footprint, generate 30% of the electricity generated by the WAC Bennett Dam. I think that's a pretty good decision by government to go ahead with that project.
We don't have a lot of time left, but you've been through an awful lot this last week or so, although, I think your colleagues might say, well, you brought it on yourself. Do you still like politics?
I've never liked politics.
No?
No.
What are you doing in the legislature?
I got involved in politics because nobody else would take the job on. I wanted to defeat the NDP. I'd moved to Cranbrook in the early 90s, and I'd never moved to Cranbrook to be a politician. I moved there to practice law and hunt and fish and spend time with my kids. But I found myself, pulled into it because, frankly, nobody else wanted to do it. I am going to stay. I'm going to stay in public life. I think we need people who will say what they believe is the truth and will speak up. And now I know I'm on the outside. I really will miss the cabinet work. I enjoyed it. But it's important for people, I believe, like me, to stay in and keep doing it.
And I'm going to say thanks very much to Bill Bennett, because I know the time is almost up. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight, and I appreciate you coming to the Capitol to do this on the day that you were put through the mill with cabinet and everything else. So it's good of you to be here.
I'd like to say it was my pleasure,
well,
but you were very, very kind to me. So thank you for that.
Next week on the show, we have this show on water, and I hope you'll be watching again. Thanks for watching Voice of BC, bringing the legislature and British Columbia politics and all sorts of other things into your living room. Good night.